It all began at 2:40 a.m. inside a chilly, humming server room, where only coffee and sheer instinct kept me alert. What I hadn't realized yet was that by sunrise, someone would quietly make a decision that would irrevocably alter my life's path. In front of me, 12 glowing screens displayed everything from firewall logs to real-time data flow across our financial systems. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Then I spotted it. Subtle, repetitive signals hitting our payment verification system. Not random noise, but carefully timed and controlled, like someone softly knocking on a locked door over and over. Testing the handle's strength, I dove into the firewall logs. No alerts. No flags raised. That was a bad sign. It meant whoever was behind this knew exactly how to slip beneath the radar, staying just below the thresholds that trigger alarms. I isolated the suspicious traffic and redirected it into a sandbox, a secured virtual environment where I could analyze it without risking contamination. The source looked internal, which made no sense at all. I traced it further. The IP pointed to a machine labeled ARC01DBBX, an internal data server that should have been permanently shut down after our last infrastructure migration. I remember personally signing off on its decommissioning, yet there it was, active, online, funneling traffic through a backdoor channel that should have ceased to exist months ago. My heart rate jumped. This wasn't a simple breach. Someone was resurrecting an old system from inside the network, someone with admin-level privileges and intimate knowledge of our architecture. I could have triggered a full lockdown, hit the panic button, but that would have raised alarms from junior engineers all the way up to the boardroom. Especially if I was wrong, I'd be blamed for freezing millions in live transactions. So I made a choice. I kept quiet. My fingers moved swiftly, isolating ports, tagging malicious strings, filtering injected code. I pulled real-time metrics and scanned for any signs of lateral movement. The deeper I dug, the more convinced I became this wasn't an external hack. It was an inside job. The server had been manually reactivated. No automation flags, no reboot logs, no scheduled tasks. Just a sudden pulse, as if it had been brought back from the dead. And I was the only person in the building aware of it by 2:54 a.m. I had neutralized the immediate threat, but the larger issue lingered. Someone inside the company had flipped on a machine we thought buried months ago, and they'd done it without leaving a trace. I didn't sleep. After shutting down the reactivated server's access points, I stayed glued to the monitoring bay, watching residual traffic as if it might somehow explain itself. There was something unsettlingly familiar about the attack's signature. How it slipped through default threat detection, how it fragmented data, requests just enough to stay invisible to automated filters. I'd seen this technique before, not in wild external hacks, but internal experimental work. I just couldn't place it. Until I recalled a test project from last year back when our team was under previous leadership. I sifted through the internal code archives. Within 10 minutes, I tracked down a sandboxed exploit used in a now-defunct simulation exercise. The parallels were uncanny. Packet delay patterns, credential spoofing, even segmentation logic. The old file was named Slipstream Alpha Rev. The author? Jonas Tellman. Why, froze, Jonas had been one of our top penetration analysts. Sharp, erratic, unpredictable. He'd pitched the Slipstream model as an automated internal vulnerability testing tool. It was aggressive, almost reckless, but brilliant when wielded right, or dangerous in the wrong hands. The project was ultimately rejected. Too unstable, too invasive, too politically sensitive. Jonas didn't handle the rejection well. Weeks later, after a clash with the department head, he was reassigned to a non-operational role. And then, suddenly, he disappeared. No goodbye email, no LinkedIn update, no office gossip. Just vanished. Now, his code had reemerged, weaponized, and someone had adapted it to mesh with our current network architecture, which hadn't even existed when Jonas was around. That meant whoever did this had deep knowledge of our present system and had reverse engineered his blueprint acting on pure instinct. I checked the internal directory logs. I doubted the name would show up. But there it was. Jonas Tellman, external security consultant, assigned to the CTO's office. The date. 3 weeks ago. Of course, Alex, the CTO, had only been in his role for a month, but was already shaking things up, replacing legacy protocols, reassigning access rights, and building what he called a lean, modern stack. And apparently, he'd brought back old ghosts in new disguises. Jonas wasn't just back. He was embedded. The thought twisted my stomach, not from surprise, but from recognition. Everything fit too perfectly. The server wasn't accidentally switched on. The code wasn't coincidental. The exploit wasn't random. It was orchestrated, controlled, and I'd walked right into their trap, cleaning up their mess while staying off the radar. I leaned back, cold air creeping under my blazer sleeves. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type. There was nothing left to search for. The answers stared back at me from the dimly lit monitor. Jonas had created the weapon. Alex had brought him back. And I was the last person who wasn't supposed to find out. I didn't have time to process the shock of Jonas's return. Knowing he was quietly under Alex's wing only confirmed what I'd long suspected. This wasn't a breach. It was a test. And I was the test subject. The breach hadn't triggered any of our automated detection systems, which left two options. Either it was so sophisticated it bypassed every defense, or someone had disabled our failsafes. I checked the settings. 3 out of 4 automated flags for eastbound packet flow had been muted, not removed, just turned down, like lowering the volume to avoid waking anyone. I stared at the screen. Our AI-driven defenses were still running, but crippled. They weren't watching what mattered. They were distracted by noise, lured by decoys. The real attack slipped right through a blind spot, and the system never even flinched. I didn't hesitate. I initiated the override protocol. One command, one line of code, and just like that, I took control away from autopilot. Our defense systems were no longer managed by algorithms. They were under my direct control. Every gate, every trigger, every sensor. From this moment on, if anything went wrong, the blame would fall squarely on me. Not the system. My palms were sweating as the terminal flashed confirmation. Manual mode engaged, and with it came silence. Real, heavy silence. No more predictive alerts. No automated feedback unless I said it. I was flying blind. But with full control, I ran a sweep the moment manual mode kicked in. And that's when I caught something new. Hidden deep within the behavior logs of Node C, 7 was a script inserted 6 weeks earlier. The code itself was subtle, neither overtly malicious nor reckless, but it quietly altered how that node reported its activity. The style was too refined, too precise. I recognized that signature writing, sharp, efficient, recursive. Jonas. What made my stomach twist, though, was a note buried in the metadata. Request approved a B. Alex Brain. He hadn't merely brought Jonas back. He'd authorized him to modify our entire reporting system that explained why our security protocols missed the breach. The sensors weren't watching the right places because they'd been instructed not to slowly. I raised my eyes, scanning the dim room. Still alone, I inhaled deeply, wiped my hands on my sleeves, and dove back in. I had to seal the entry point without tipping them off. They couldn't know I was monitoring their moves. My fingers picked up speed. I restructured firewall hierarchies, rerouted logging processes, and tagged suspicious outbound signals for discreet surveillance. If they wanted stealth, I'd show them what true stealth looked like. But as I worked, something shifted inside me. I was suddenly thrown back 10 years to my first week on night rotation. A nervous junior analyst jittering on her third energy drink, spotting an odd spike in outbound traffic from a deprecated backup system. Panicked, I called my manager, who brushed it off, telling me to let the AI handle it 2 hours later. The system crashed. I was the one who stayed behind, alone and cold and terrified to restore it. That night taught me a lesson no textbook ever could. Systems don't save themselves. People do, and people like Alex, they rely on systems hiding what they don't want anyone to see. My back ached, but I pressed on. There was no room for fear now, only exactness. By the time dawn's first light crept over the skyline, I'd neutralized the rogue code, reinforced critical nodes, and created a shadow layer of alerts visible only to me. I didn't know who else was involved, nor how deep this went. But one thing was crystal clear. The system wasn't broken. It was deliberately blind by 3:03 a.m. The breach was contained. I'd shut down the rogue internal server, terminated all active session tokens, revoked compromised digital certificates, and re-verified every endpoint connection. The attack vector was neutralized without ever touching an external gateway. Not even our Tier 2 systems registered any disruption. That was the whole point, of course. It had been engineered to be invisible, but I'd seen it and stopped it. The system was secure. No data stolen, no services interrupted, no clients affected on paper. It was a flawless containment. Yet I felt nothing but emptiness. I leaned back as the 12 monitors cast a soft green glow across the cold room. My pulse slowed, but the silence felt heavy, sterile. At 3:07 a.m., I opened a fresh incident report titled, Unauthorized Internal Breach, Node ARC01DBX, Severity, Critical, Status, Resolved. I documented everything: discovery time, intrusion pattern, IP trace, escalation path, precise countermeasures. I even attached side-by-side comparisons of the modified sensor script against the clean baseline from 6 weeks prior. I flagged Jonas's code fingerprints, highlighted the metadata linking approval to Alex Brain. It was the most detailed technical report I'd submitted in over a year. At 3:21, I manually entered recipients: Alex Brain, Leo Kwan, Head of Infrastructure, Internal Audit, and Carla Mendel, our CEO. I hit send. Then I waited at 3:28. I checked the dashboard for any sign of acknowledgement. No ticket activity. No internal ping at 3:35. Still silence. No replies. Not even an automatic response. Out of habit, I reopened the sent message to confirm it had left my outbox. That's when I noticed it. Next to Carla's name, delivery status read, rerouted. Security Digest Q. What? I expanded the email header. The system had automatically filtered her address, marking it as a non-operational recipient for internal security traffic. My report had been rerouted into the Daily Digest, a compiled batch reviewed around 7:30 a.m., usually by someone in legal. I hadn't authorized this. In fact, I'd sent dozens of high-priority incidents before with direct CEO visibility. None had ever been filtered. But now, the system decided Carla didn't need to see the biggest breach we'd ever faced. No. Someone had made that call. And I was starting to understand who I minimized the report, fingers hovering over the keyboard. No one else had responded. No calls, no messages, just the quiet hum of servers and static ringing in my head. At 3:43, Leah from Facilities stepped into the server bay carrying a clipboard on her overnight rounds. "Still here?" she asked softly. "Just finished," I replied, forcing calm. She glanced at the screens, noting bandwidth spikes around 240 and a power drain in Sector C. Something had happened. I hesitated. Nothing that would make the news, though she smiled faintly. "You always fix things before the rest of us even notice they're broken." I nodded. "Bad habit." She paused, then asked, Claire, does anyone ever thank you for what you do? I gave a half smile. Only the machines. She chuckled and left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. At 3:51, I powered down my workstation, slung my bag over my shoulder, and headed for the elevator. The building felt dim and sterile, as it always did after midnight. But tonight, it was colder, like something had been erased, and I wasn't sure if it was the breach or me. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside. My reflection in the polished metal looked like me, but quieter, smaller, out of frame. I scanned my ID badge out of habit. No beep. It wasn't deactivated, just slow. Or maybe I was only noticing now. As the doors closed, I glanced at the camera in the corner, the single red dot blinking steadily. It wasn't watching me. It was recording my exit clean, silent, like I'd never been there at all by 6:15 a.m. The building was no longer mine alone. I walked back into Arcavia headquarters, still wearing last night's clothes, my hair hastily tied back, eyes shadowed from too much screen time. The sun had started creeping across the horizon, slicing long beams of light through the glass-paneled lobby. Morning had come, but something felt off. Jenna, the front desk attendant, didn't greet me as usual. No nod. No, "Hey, Claire." She just stared down at her screen, tapping away distractedly. I tried not to take it personally. Inside the elevator, two software engineers, Dylan and Mira, got on behind me. They used to ask questions about load balancing or crack jokes about late-night code pushes. This time, they stood stiff and silent. Mira glanced at me briefly, then looked away. Dylan tapped his badge and stared straight ahead. No small talk. No eye contact. By 6:22 a.m., I arrived on the 4th floor, the hub for security and infrastructure overhead. The lights were fully on, humming a bright white glow that stretched across rows of cubicles and sleek conference rooms. I passed the espresso bar, empty then Leo's desk, also deserted ahead. I spotted Leah emerging from the HR suite, tablet in hand. Leah Jameson, our head of people operations, wasn't just a coworker. We'd been through 6 years together, survived 2 rounds of layoffs side by side. She was the one who talked me into staying when I almost left for a startup last spring. Sundays meant meme drops from her, and every Friday like clockwork, a peppermint tea waiting on my desk. Our eyes met briefly, but then she looked away and walked past without a word. Not even a nod. A cold shiver ran down my spine. That wasn't just Leah busy with work. That was Leah avoiding something. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to piece together the atmosphere around me. Background murmurs buzzed, but no full sentences reached me. People whispered, not to me, but about me. I tapped my phone, opened Slack, hoping for some announcement. Policy changes, restructuring, anything to explain the shift. I searched for the core security channel. Nothing. That couldn't be right. I scrolled through my sidebar. Infra, DevOps, compliance, all still there. But security? Missing switching to desktop. I manually typed, "Join core security." The system replied, "Channel does not exist, or you do not have permission to view it." Error. Channel does not exist, or you do not have permission. My heart skipped. Pulling up Slack's access logs, filtering by group permissions, I found it buried 3 layers deep. I had been removed from the core security workspace 48 hours earlier at 2:26 p.m., 2 days before the breach. No notification, no request, no warning. Just gone. I stared at the screen. My fingertips twitched. Claire. I turned. It was Marcus, one of the newer cybersecurity analysts, friendly, sharp, maybe too honest for this floor. He looked uneasy, holding a coffee cup and laptop under his arm. I saw the internal logs," he said carefully. "That was some quick work last night." I nodded. "Thanks." He glanced around, then leaned in. "They told us to keep quiet." I narrowed my eyes. Who did? He hesitated. Alex's office. He shifted uncomfortably. Claire, I'm not supposed to say this, but they scrubbed the breach log from the team board, called it a false alarm, and folded it into the weekly diagnostics. I clenched my jaw. I thought you should know, he added quickly, then walked away before I could respond. Standing there, pulse pounding, thoughts swirling. My report, the silence, the sideways glances. It wasn't paranoia. It was a deliberate, coordinated exclusion. Someone wanted me out of the loop, not just ignored, but erased. I sat at my desk, but the chair felt alien. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved on their own. I opened the old backup dashboard, the one abandoned since Alex forced migration to the new system. My access was still active there, which meant one thing. I still had eyes where they forgot to shut doors at 8:57 a.m. My company badge buzzed with a calendar alert. Meeting with Alex Brain. Location: executive level, 19th floor. Scheduled for 9 a.m., sharp no subject line, no assistant CCD. Just me and a meeting I hadn't asked for. I stood before the elevator, frozen a moment longer than necessary, then stepped inside. The ascent felt slower than usual. Too smooth, too quiet, floors passed with normal hum. But the 19th was different. The place where noise died executive silence as the doors slid open. Valeria, Alex's assistant, sat at reception, usually warm, often offering coffee today. Barely a glance. He's ready for you. I knocked once. No reply. I pushed the door open. Alex stood by the window, back to me, arms folded behind him. The city skyline stretched before him like a kingdom he owned. He didn't turn Claire, he said, voice low and diplomatic. Have a seat. I didn't slowly. He walked to his desk. A tan envelope rested center stage, as if waiting. He tapped it with 2 fingers. We're restructuring, he said, realigning security functions to match future objectives. My pulse quickened. What does that mean exactly? I asked. We're moving to an external model third-party expertise, more flexible, less overhead. He gestured at the envelope. Your exit package is inside a generous transition. I blinked. You're firing me. He smiled politely. Let's call it a realignment. No one realigns someone overnight without warning. Especially not after they stopped a major breach. His face remained steady. The incident was quickly resolved and overblown. According to the latest review, it doesn't qualify as a reportable event. I stepped forward, heat rising in my chest. You buried my report. I wrote it properly. You removed me from the core security channel. I streamlined communications. You brought Jonas back. That stopped him for a moment. He tilted his head. Claire, let's not get emotional. I stared him down. Jonas was removed for cause he was unstable. He proposed exploits, then justified them as tests. Now you bring him back? Alex slid a folder across the table. Jonas Tech is our new partner. They've built an agile penetration team, modern protocols, real-time response capabilities. They signed the contract yesterday afternoon. I opened the folder. Jonas Tech LLC vendor agreement, approved and signed just yesterday at 3:17 p.m. My stomach twisted. You signed this while I was still neutralizing the breach he helped design. Alex didn't flinch. You've done valuable work, Claire, but systems evolve. We need vendors who innovate faster, leaner, with less internal friction. I lifted the envelope. It felt light. Final. Is this why no one's talking to me? Why Leah won't meet my eyes? Why the breach log disappeared? He offered a calm smile. I can't speak for others. We appreciate your 7 years. No, I snapped, voice rising. You don't. You used me to fix what your vendor broke, then pushed me aside so no one would question why you hired him in the first place. Alex stepped behind his desk. You're taking this too personally. I laughed once, hollow. You made it personal the moment you chose silence over truth. He said nothing. I turned to leave, gripping the envelope tight. At the door, I paused. One last question, I said. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Or did you assume I'd just walk away silently? He said nothing. I turned and left. The elevator ride down felt slower this time. The envelope in my hand was heavy, but that weight was nothing compared to the pressure swelling inside my chest. A mix of rage, betrayal, disbelief, but never despair. Not when I still had access to the one system they forgot to revoke. I didn't go anywhere after leaving the tower. No rooftop bar, no quiet park bench, no long drive to clear my mind. I went straight home. It was 10:02 a.m. when I stepped inside my apartment. The blinds were still shut. My laptop left open exactly where I'd closed it the night before. The room smelled of burnt coffee and overheated plastic. A stillness hung there that matched how I felt inside, hollow yet sharp-edged. Without opening it, I dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter. I didn't need to see the figure inside. I already knew its worth. A signature and silence. I sat down at my workstation, powered on the second monitor, and opened the air-gapped backup terminal. It wasn't connected to the cloud. It wasn't part of Arcavia's network. It was mine. The last piece they hadn't touched. My fingers moved slow and deliberate, typing command after command, restoring diagnostic logs from the breach window from 2:01 a.m. up to 3:15 a.m. What I found shouldn't have shocked me, but it still stung exactly 21 minutes before the breach started. A manual security alert suppression had been triggered. Node Zurich Gateway. Action disable behavioral alerts. Type A packets. Time 1:39 a.m. accessed via user profile ab.r01. The system handle assigned to Alex Brain. I stared at that string for a long time. Alex Brain. He didn't just bury the aftermath. He prepared the breach. He shut off the sensors, then waited for chaos to unfold. And when I saved all the evidence before it exploded, he made sure I disappeared along with the problem. I clenched my jaw, then exhaled slowly. Not rage. Not yet. I needed proof, not for them. For myself, I opened a hidden directory inside the backup system. A decrypted archive I'd created a year ago when I started noticing subtle anomalies in team permissions and audit logs. It was a habit I'd formed long before Alex arrived, back when trust was earned through redundancy. Inside the archive was a nested folder labeled Personnel Deep. It took a moment to unpack. There was a PDF document with no metadata, just a flat file titled Security Restructure Proposal V3. 2. Final. The first 3 pages laid out high-level strategy points, budget savings, outsourcing benefits, a generic case for externalizing security roles. Page 4 began listing names. I scrolled slowly. Each name had a status: retain, reassign, phase out. Mine was first, Claire Kendrick, phase out, Q2. Reason: resistance to integration, legacy mindset, poor adaptability to vendor-based architecture. I read it again. Then again. Below mine were 6 others. 3 engineers, 2 analysts, 1 senior compliance officer, all marked for transition or exit. I knew these people I'd mentored too. Had lunch with another just last week. They had no idea. This wasn't about efficiency. It was a purge. I leaned back, hand pressed against my mouth, chest tightening. Not from anger, but grief. Grief for a version of the company I once believed in, one where merit meant longevity, where loyalty didn't come with an expiration date. I picked up my phone, hovered over a text thread with Leo, but didn't send anything. He was probably in a meeting. Or worse, already in line. I opened my personal notebook, black leather torn at the corner, and started writing 10:18 a.m. breach initiated by internal override sensor suppression, confirmed decision to terminate made prior to event control was never lost. It was handed over. I paused, then underlined that last sentence twice. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled a small hard drive from my desk drawer, a sealed black unit with no labels. It wasn't just a backup. It was what I called the failsafe, a full copy of Arcavia's infrastructure schema, plus a legacy admin credential chain that hadn't been purged when Alex's team switched the system last quarter, because no one thought to look back far enough, because no one thought I'd still be here. I connected the drive. The lights blinked. Everything I needed to understand the full shape of what they were doing, and to undo it if I chose, was here. I didn't know what my next move was yet, but I knew this. They had underestimated me. They thought breaking my heart would end me. Instead, it opened my eyes. It was 9:02 p.m. when I checked the watchdog file again. I sat by the window, blinds halfway drawn, orange city haze spilling across the carpet. The air inside was still, broken only by the faint hum of backup fans and a low whistle of wind between glass panes. I wasn't angry anymore. That had burned off hours ago. Now I was ready. I opened the watchdog script. The code was clean, sparse, silent. It didn't shout. It waited, built 2 years ago, back when internal threats were only rumors and senior engineers still had freedom to act without seeking permission. The protocol was officially called a continuity safeguard. An internal failsafe meant to preserve system integrity during account loss or unexpected role termination. But everyone called it what it was. A watchdog, it monitored heartbeat signals tied to credential clusters. If a critical account was revoked outside normal windows, the watchdog triggered a tiered response. Tier 1, isolate all active command modules. Tier 2, disable financial data streaming. Tier 3, initiate full lock containment and log archival. Beneath Tier 3, buried deep and hidden from most eyes, was Tier 4, a code only I knew it sent a ping to a secondary server halfway across the globe, a machine outside Arcavia's ecosystem, something I named Echo Route. It lived on a server stack in rural Estonia, hosted through a shadow node built years ago with help from an old colleague, Mara Lynn, a former encryption specialist turned white hat consultant. Mara once told me over noodles in Singapore, if you ever build a system to protect something big, make sure the lock isn't inside the vault. Echo Route wasn't just a backup. It was an archive, a memory. It held a snapshot of the entire Arcavia system as it existed before the vendor integration push. It contained permission trees, admin overrides, and the full user access log from before Alex Brain ever signed a single document. And if the watchdog triggered, Echo Route would wake up. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the lines of code the script hadn't changed. It didn't need to. It was built to be quiet, unassuming. It didn't pose questions. It only listened for one thing: whether Claire Kendrick's access had been revoked without following proper protocol. That was the sole focus. And now, all that remained was to wait. I let my hands rest gently on the keyboard and opened an old email thread from 6 months prior. A short conversation between Mara and me after she transitioned her team to a hybrid infrastructure in Tallinn. Her last message still sat unopened in my inbox. Claire, if you ever need to disappear, ping twice and let the code do the talking. We built it exactly for moments like this. You're not paranoid for preparing. You're just rare. I never responded back then. But I wasn't about to stay silent. Now I clicked compose and typed a simple 4-word message. Watchdog still on standby. Sent it with no flourish, no emotion, just stating the facts. Closing the window, I exited the terminal. That script would quietly run in the background, completely invisible to any of Arcavia's current monitoring tools. Sure, Alex's team had shifted the stack, but they hadn't touched the fundamental logic beneath. They didn't realize which cables were still humming beneath their polished interfaces. They never bothered to look beneath the floorboards. I rose, walked over to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let the silence settle over me. This wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the calm before a storm I had long been ready for, a storm I didn't have to stop, only outlast by 9:48 p.m. The city outside had dimmed, save for the occasional traffic light and flickering apartment window. I stood at my window, gazing down at the still-lit offices of Arcavia's tower across the river. That building had felt like home for 7 years now. It looked like an empty skeleton of glass and steel. No substance, no memories. They believed silence could erase me, but they forgot I had built the part of the system that never rests. At 7:23 the next morning, I stood outside Arcavia Tower for what I believed was the final time I carried nothing but a scarf, my access badge, and a silver USB tucked inside my coat pocket. The sidewalk buzzed with the morning rush, faces lit by screens and caffeine-fueled focus, but nobody noticed me slip inside, just as countless times before. Only this time, I wasn't coming to fix a crisis, I was coming to walk away. The lobby was warmer than I remembered. The polished floors reflected too much light, and new branding panels lined the walls. Agility, trust, innovation. I almost chuckled. The security guard at the front desk was new, barely lifting his eyes as I tapped my badge. It still worked, meaning they hadn't revoked my physical access yet, only the digital parts they thought mattered. The elevator carried me to the 4th floor, security division. The hallway I once called home. Everything was unchanged. The brittle fern slowly dying in the corner, the smudged glass wall beside the whiteboard, even the bulletin board still holding my post-it note from last quarter's security audit. People are the first firewall, don't forget. No one looked up as I passed. A few glanced briefly, then quickly looked away. Some didn't even notice I was already a ghost. Leah stepped out of conference room 2 just as I walked by. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. Neither did I. But she gave a faint nod. No approval, no apology. Only recognition. I moved on my desk was exactly as I left it. The mousepad tilted slightly. The notepad opened to half-finished notes on threat modeling. My chipped black coffee mug sat beside the monitor. Cold coffee etched in a single brown ring. I sat for a moment, then retrieved the silver USB from my coat pocket and placed it gently on the keyboard. It looked unassuming, but contained everything. Encrypted logs, cross-referenced timestamps, behavioral anomalies, and an auto-executing script not harmful, but loud enough plugged into any Arcavia machine. It would reveal a clean visual audit trail. No edits, no spin, just raw facts. I left no note. Whoever found it would either understand or disregard it. Both outcomes suited me. As I turned to leave, the rapid tapping of keys echoed down the hall. I glanced toward the open tech bay Jonas. He didn't see me, hunched over Terminal 6, switching windows rapidly. A second monitor displayed the infrastructure permissions dashboard. It looked like he was preparing a root key migration. I stepped closer, unnoticed. He was rerouting admin privileges again, this time using a mirrored account system. A sloppy tactic if you didn't audit thoroughly. His hand hovered over the push-leave command. He hesitated, then switched back to a diagnostic window, likely checking response times, but he missed something in the bottom corner of the screen, nearly invisible. A small flag blinked. Internal triggers not cleared. That meant any command he executed, any privilege escalation, would be mirrored into the legacy monitoring layer, the one forgotten since migration, the one I still had access to. I smiled not with vengeance or satisfaction, but like someone watching a chess move fall perfectly into place. Not because I forced it, but because the opponent never realized the trap buried in his own play. I turned away and walked back down the hall. Passing the break room, a junior engineer named Connie looked up and gave me a small wave. She didn't know. None of them did. They still assumed the system watched over them, that somewhere, someone guarded the gates. Maybe that used to be me. Maybe it still was. The elevator doors slid open silently. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and exhaled. No anger, no panic, only calm control. As the doors closed, I thought one last time about the USB drive. It would sit there untouched until someone curious or brave plugged it in, or until the right mistake brought it to light. Either way, it was no longer my burden to be loud. The code would speak on its own at 7:01 a.m. The system blinked, then fell silent. Claire's account, C. Kendrick Primary, was deactivated by a script pushed through the CTO's master override protocol. No alert, no confirmation, just a silent execution command sent from Terminal 9 under admin clearance within the mainframe. The signal pulsed once, then split into 3 paths. The watchdog woke on the 22nd floor. Jonas sipped burnt coffee, half reading a DevOps audit sheet as the infrastructure console pulsed green. He had just finished pushing live the mirrored permission set he coded overnight, migrating root-level access from legacy users to his control schema. The first flicker happened on dashboard 6. Client reporting lagged by exactly 4 seconds. He didn't notice by 7:02, the firewall validation node began looping, triggering the watchdog's Tier 1 protocol. The system quietly began retracting command privileges from every terminal not running verified legacy tokens. Access above Tier 4 shifted to read-only mode. Passwords reset silently in the background. Randomized strings generated by the watchdog's core logic. On the 4th floor, Kalani, a junior engineer, looked up from her screen and blinked. "Hey, is the dev dashboard acting weird for you too?" she asked aloud. No reply by 7:03. The revenue reconciliation node missed 2 consecutive internal pings, triggering Tier 2 protocols. Dashboard started going dark. First financial, then security. A simple error message appeared. Root mismatch. Please contact System Administrator. Meanwhile, on the 19th floor boardroom, a breakfast meeting was underway. CEO. Carla Mendel sat at the head of the table. Eyes on quarterly growth slides, Alex Brain stood beside the screen, confident, clicking through points on efficiency, streamlined security, and modernization. Suddenly, Valeria, Carla's assistant, entered without knocking, looking pale. "Carla, you just received an alert in your private inbox." Carla raised an eyebrow. "What kind of alert?" Valeria handed her a printed page, freshly run from the secure legal printer. Carla read it once, then again. Slower credential mismatch emergency lockdown initiated by legacy script trigger time. 7:01 a.m. subject. C. Kendrick Primary revoked location. Arcavia Global Core. She glanced at Alex, who remained silent by 7:04. Chaos rippled through the building. Internal emails bounced back. Terminals auto-locked. 2 compliance analysts were ejected mid-query from their audit shells. 3 sales account managers lost access to client files. One shouted from behind a glass wall, "I can't access the contract vault. Everything's grayed out." Kalani stood, heading to Leah's desk. "Hey, something's wrong with the endpoint monitor. My admin role just downgraded mid-session." Leah rapidly clicked at her station. "Mine too, and the logs are scrambled." Jonas, 3 floors up, finally noticed the pattern. He froze on the monitoring panel. All his permissions revoked, even his override tool locked. A blinking message glared. System integrity violation. Escalation disabled. He dashed to a backup terminal, but Tier 3 of the watchdog had already isolated all non-verified subnets. Jonas's text control path was gone. Meanwhile, Alex's phone buzzed. 1 notification, then 10 more. He didn't look at Carla or speak at 7:06. The watchdog executed Tier 4. A compressed burst of code was sent to an external node, Echo Route, outside Arcavia's control. From there, a summary audit was generated and sent to Carla Mendel's inbox under the subject. Containment triggered, audit attached, unauthorized clearance migration detected. The report was concise, clean, time-stamped, signed with Claire's original developer key. Carla rose, silencing the room. She fixed her gaze on Alex and said quietly, "You hid the breach, then fired the only person who stopped it." Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out outside the boardroom. Red banners appeared on hallway monitors. Access temporarily disabled. Please wait for system revalidation by 7:07. The entire building entered a silent lockdown. No alarms, no sirens. Just one message echoing silently throughout every connected system. Watchdog protocol complete by 7:42 a.m. I sat at Lindstrom Cafe, 2 blocks east across the river from Arcavia Tower. The cafe smelled of dark roast coffee, cinnamon, and a hint of rain clinging to the air. The city hummed its usual rhythm outside, but across the bridge, Arcavia's glass fortress pulsed like a wounded machine. From here, it looked like any office tower, but I could see the truth inside. People moving quickly, not with purpose, but with panic. I sipped slowly from a ceramic mug, black coffee, no sugar, and leaned back, my coat draped neatly over the chair, scarf folded beside my laptop. The silver USB was gone, of course, left exactly where it needed to be. Elena, the barista, glanced at me from behind the counter. "You used to work over there, right?" she asked, nodding toward the tower. "I did." "Something's going on," she said. "Phones have been ringing nonstop since 7. She pointed to a small TV in the corner. The local news ticker ran. "Breaking. Arcavia systems hit by internal lockdown. Trading platforms suspended, estimated losses climbed to 71 million. I didn't flinch. Another headline flashed. Sources say internal audit triggered by legacy protocol breach. A shaky video clip played. Dozens filing out of Arcavia's lobby, some on phones, others staring at frozen tablets. Jonas appeared for a split second, arguing with a uniformed technician outside the window. I spotted Kalani near the front steps, standing still, holding her badge, staring at the turnstile that no longer lit green. Elena turned up the volume. A reporter's voice crackled through the static. "Internal watchdog protocol triggered at exactly 7:01 this morning. According to confidential sources, the identity of the original developer remains unconfirmed." I smiled behind my coffee's rim. Let it stay unconfirmed. Let them guess I opened my laptop, not for work, just observation. My private dashboard loaded fast. Clean connection. Echo Route stable audit logs already backed up across 2 continents. They couldn't stop it now. The truth was moving faster than them. A ping interrupted my thoughts. A message from Mara Clean signal, "Well done, quiet as ever." Another notification buzzed. From a public platform, Mason Grant, CEO of Grantwell Capital, Arcavia's largest institutional client, posted a single line on his verified account. "Only person I trust now is Claire. Without her, we're lost." Elena gasped softly. "Wait, Claire, that's you?" I looked up, her eyes wide. I nodded once she said nothing more, simply poured another cup of coffee and placed it beside mine. "No charge," she said by 7:53 a.m. Carla Mendel stepped outside Arcavia's lobby through the window. I saw her, stern, unreadable, no statement, no press, but the way her team clustered said everything. She was furious, not at the collapse itself, but the silence that allowed it. The collapse didn't scream. It whispered, it asked, "Why didn't you listen when it was quiet?" Behind Carla, Alex was nowhere to be seen. I wondered if he was still upstairs, scrambling, drafting apologies, deleting evidence too late. The cafe stayed quiet around me. Elena returned to polishing glasses. A man sat at a distant table, typing with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. Life carried on as usual. But I was now outside that noise. I glanced back once more at the tower, not with bitterness or triumph, but with clear understanding I hadn't broken them. I'd simply stopped holding them together at 9:04 a.m. The official statement was released. Effective immediately, Alex Brain resigned as Chief Technology Officer of Arcavia Systems. An internal review was underway, and transition support would be provided. The message was terse, coldly professional, but everyone understood the meaning beneath it. Behind closed doors, the board had finally examined the chain of failures. The ghost signatures of Jonas, suspicious log alterations, the silent rerouting of internal alerts, and, of course, Claire Kendrick's name threaded through every early detection system still active by 10:06 a.m. Jonas Tech's office had been cleared out. Jonas himself was unreachable. By lunchtime, his company's homepage returned a 404 error inside Arcavia Tower. Silence lingered like smoke after a fire. Leah didn't come in that day. But mid-morning, her message arrived. "Claire, I'm sorry I should have spoken up. I was wrong. You were right." Claire sat by her window at home, the city glowing beneath the clouds. Her inbox overflowed with external offers and internal apologies. Among them was a quiet inquiry from Carla's executive office, asking if Claire would consider consulting during the restoration process. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she opened the archived folder labeled Silver Drive Backup. Inside was a single document. No executables, no malware, no override commands. Just a clean PDF titled Incident Report 3:01 a.m. Breach Containment prepared by Claire Kendrick, full log chain attached unedited. It was the exact report she had sent weeks earlier, the one that had been filtered, buried, and ignored. That's what was on the USB. No tricks, no revenge scripts, no destruction plans, just the truth. And when someone finally read it, really read it, everything else unraveled on its own. Claire stood and stretched. She didn't feel victorious or smug. What she felt was harder to name, a quiet relief, like setting something down after carrying it longer than she intended. A message pinged from Mara. Echo route logs have been archived. Your access remains active, but maybe you won't need it anymore. Claire smiled, not at the screen, but at the thought. She closed her laptop, reached for her coat, and stepped outside. The world kept turning. Cafes opened, trains ran on time, emails pinged in offices she no longer needed to enter. But something had shifted, not outside her, but within. She grabbed her notebook, flipped to the last page, and wrote 2 lines in tight script. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped protecting them. Closing the book, she walked out the door. Sometimes justice doesn't roar like fire. It looks like walking away while everything behind you collapses under the weight of its own lies. If you've ever felt underestimated, ignored, or silenced for standing up for what's right, know this. Your silence is not weakness. It's power. And your truth is waiting, just as Claire's was. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to remember their quiet strength, and don't forget to subscribe, because there's always another story, another reckoning, and another Claire waiting.